CJ Flyer back with a fire in another YouTube video. Today teaching you my top 3 tips to dominate the transfer portal in college football 27. Now I made sure to wait and do some testing following the patch that was applied on July 16th, and sure enough, even after EA made some changes to the recruiting logic for the CPU, these tricks will still work for your dynasty. And not only do these tips apply to offline dynasties, but they apply to multi-user online dynasties as well. Starting off with tip number 1, setting aside complimentary visit players at the end of the regular season. So as you get towards weeks 10, 11, and 12 in the regular season, you are to a point where most of the 4 and 5 star players are going to be signed to various schools, and you might still have some glaring holes in your roster that you're trying to fill out going into the following season. Perhaps you had mostly focused your recruiting hours towards defensive players, but you still have to sign on some wide receivers going into the transfer portal. Well, what you can do is towards the end of the regular season, starting at around week 10, once you've figured out that, hey, there's not any good wide receivers left available, or at least ones that you care to pursue and you'd rather wait until the transfer portal to see what kind of transfer wide receivers are available. In the meantime, if you have room on your recruiting board, I highly suggest you start to add 1-star and 2-star recruits onto your recruiting board that would be complementary to the wide receiver or whatever position you're looking to pursue in the transfer portal. Go ahead, add them to your board, and start applying recruiting hours. Now, of course, you don't actually intend to sign these recruits. I would assume you don't want any 1-star or 2-star recruits on your roster if you're already doing well enough to get 3-star recruits or higher. Their sole purpose is to provide complimentary visits once you get into the transfer portal. So as soon as any of these players progress to their top 5 schools, immediately remove any recruiting hours and hold off on any further actions with that recruit until you reach the transfer portal. Now, if you reach the end of the regular season and you find during one of those windows that you're not able to access the recruiting interface, don't panic. Once you get to bowl season week 1, you are able to access early National Signing Day, and from there you can remove the player from your recruiting board or remove the send the house or hard sell that you might have applied to them to prevent them from hard committing to your school. Okay, now we're entering the transfer portal, and I have this wide receiver transfer that I'd like to target, and of course I have a number of quarterback 1-star, 2-star recruits that we can now go ahead and offer a scholarship in order to be able to schedule a visit in order to provide complimentary visits to my wide receiver transfer targets visit. Now, this is also crucial for these quarterbacks. You do not want to apply any additional recruiting hours. Just offer them a scholarship with 0 dynasty points attached. And do not do this during week 4 of the transfer portal. You don't want to accidentally sign any of these recruits onto your team. So do this no later than week 3, and this doesn't just apply to wide receivers with quarterbacks as their complimentary visit. You could do this for other positions as well. For example, running backs have offensive linemen as complimentary visits to them, so you could go ahead and add a bunch of 1-star and 2-star offensive linemen to your recruiting board at the end of the regular season. Get them into their top 5 for interest, and then go ahead and schedule those visits come transfer portal time. And then immediately, as soon as those visits have happened during the following week, remove those 1-star and 2-star recruits from your board. You've gotten the benefit from the complimentary visits already. You don't need these players on your board anymore. You don't want to accidentally sign them. Immediately remove them. They are just there to help give you a little bit of a boost with your visits. Now, obviously, this tip is going to be a little bit more difficult to apply when you have a smaller school with fewer recruiting hours. But as you see, I'm showing you an example here with 2-star Purdue. Obviously not the worst school with the lowest recruiting hours, but still not a good school for recruiting in general. And yet I'm still able to apply the tip I just provided you. All right, tip number 2, doing scouting before the actual transfer portal starts. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, during the players leaving phase, you can go ahead and start going through the various rosters, looking through at players that are potentially going to become transfers. If the persuasion chance is low, extremely low, or none, there's a very high likelihood that player is going to be available in the following week once you advance to the transfer portal. And not only can you see which players are likely to become transfers from the other rosters, but you can also look at their player card, see their ratings, see their abilities, and see their skill caps. Now, while you can't see the development trait for in real life players, you can head on over to a website called teamcrafters.net and you can search up that player and find their dev trait. And then for generated players as you progress further into your dynasty, generally speaking, more skill caps on a player is going to indicate a worse development trait, although that's not always the most reliable indicator. At the very least though, for example, if you see a cornerback that you would like to progress their man coverage up to a 90 or higher, and you take a look at their player card, and even if they are a high overall, if you look at that player card and you see skill caps that are preventing that player from reaching a 90 man coverage, then you know right away, hey, this is not a player I really want to pursue if you are looking to pursue high man coverage potential type cornerbacks. And this goes for any position. Say there's a running back, a north-south receiver that has a high overall, but then you go into their player card, you see that their speed is in the 80s, and that they're capped out and won't be able to reach 95 speed. Then perhaps that's a player you don't want to pursue if you value higher speed running backs. So of course, doing all of this scouting during players leaving, it's going to save you recruiting hours during the transfer portal itself, and you're arguably getting more intel because during the transfer portal, when you scout for players, you only see a select few ratings and only their abilities. You don't get to see dev trait necessarily. You don't get to see the number of skill caps that they have available. Now, if you had accidentally skipped past the players leaving phase and are in the transfer portal, if you are in one of your first 3 to 4 seasons, you can still figure out what a development trait is for a transfer player if they are an in real life player, again, by going to teamcrafters.net. Which again is a free Dynasty tool. I'm not sponsored, partnered, affiliated with them at all, but they are one of the free Dynasty tools that I gave a shout out to during my free Dynasty tools video. One other thing to note about this tip, do not waste time analyzing players that will likely be locked out from recruiting due to a deal breaker grade. For example, if you are a school that just had a terrible season, perhaps you had 6 wins, 6 losses, or even 8 wins or 9 wins, but then the transfer player that you're looking at, their deal breaker is championship contender, and they expect a grade of A or higher, well then you're very unlikely to even be able to contend for that recruit, to even be able to offer that transfer player any hours, and so it's really not worthwhile to even invest the time in doing the research for players with that deal breaker. Alright, moving on to my third and final tip of this video, signing leftover transfer players with no current offers during the last week of the transfer portal. Now this of course works best in offline dynasties, but it can be useful in online dynasties as well. To put it simply, during week 4 of the transfer portal, you will still see a number of decent transfer players that have no scholarship offers whatsoever. They might have had some recruiting hours applied to various CPU schools, but they won't have any scholarship offers applied. And so this gives you the perfect opportunity to swoop right in, give this transfer a scholarship offer, and potentially for 0 NIL as well. Now, I've done some testing on this before the patch and after the patch. Pre-patch, it was nearly a guarantee that you would land these recruits, these transfer players for 0 NIL. However, post-patch from July 16th, there are some nuances that you need to account for in order to increase the likelihood that you will still get these transfer players on your team. So there's 2 main approaches you can take here. One, you could offer this transfer player with 0 offers, a scholarship offer with their expected NIL or greater, on top of sending the house or hard selling, which will generally allow you to position change and manually upgrade this player as you normally would during the offseason. However, you could also offer a scholarship with 0 NIL attached. It does not matter if this player's expected NIL is 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. It does not matter. If you are the only offer, then more than likely the transfer will eventually end up on your roster. However, they will not end up on the roster until Encouraged Transfers Week. They will have shown as having signed with a different school. Now, this is important. Pre-patch, this was almost a guarantee that the player would show as getting signed to another school if you just gave the scholarship offer with 0 NIL attached. However, I have found that post-patch, and I do not know the reason why, I do not know what the percent likelihood is, but if you offer a scholarship with 0 NIL attached and don't apply recruiting hours on top of that, there is a possibility that the recruit will not get signed by another school and that they will just completely disappear from all of the rosters. So in order to mitigate that, the best approach here, if you are going to offer a scholarship with 0 NIL attached, is to also send the house on top of that. That will more than likely boost them ahead enough that they will get signed by another school. Again, I don't know the exact reasons. I have tried to take control of the CPU schools that do show up as ending up having signed said recruit. I have not seen any hours applied when I take over those CPU schools, and by taking over, I mean in an offline dynasty. I will go to the member screen, I'll add a member, I will join in as the school that ended up showing as signing that transfer, and I don't see any hours applied. So I'm not sure why this is the case, but from my findings so far, in order to increase the odds that this 0 NIL transfer player ends up on your roster by Encouraged Transfers Week, you should absolutely send the house on top of offering the 0 NIL scholarship. Now, this 0 NIL approach is great and all, but your next thought might be, well, sure, I get this player for 0 NIL going into the next season, but is it only a one-year rental? Are they going to expect a bunch of NIL at the end of season recap going into the season afterwards? And from my findings so far, it's kind of hit or miss. It's not very consistent. Sometimes those players will absolutely ask for an abundance of NIL, and in some cases, they will ask for very little, if none at all. But at the very least, if that is a concern of yours, what I would do is strictly focus on players that are going to be entering their senior season, because that way you don't really have to worry about that. You already know they're a one-year rental anyways. You already know that they're going to leave your roster at the end of the season. There's no point in attempting to retain them. And so you get some nice quality players for 0 NIL going into the next season. Now, if you have any further questions regarding the transfer portal, please leave a comment down below and I will do my best to answer your question. Otherwise, click one of the videos on your screen now for some more College Football 27 Dynasty tutorials.